Hey, I'm Thom Pankhurst. I'm here at GAK in Brighton, and I'm going to introduce you to some tapping. So I get approached by people and they say, I want to get into tapping. What's the best way of going about it? Or, they might already be tapping, but they're not really sure of the things that they could do with it, and they're sort of stuck in a rut with it. So hopefully I'm going to show you some things that will break you out of a rut or get you tapping if you've never tapped before. So the first thing we need to talk about is why you would tap. So basically, it just sounds different, which is a really nice additional tool to have in your kit. You can use it as an extension of your left hand. So if your left hand is busy and you need to hit a note up here, you don't necessarily have to move your hand. You can just tap it instead. And then you can use it for different rhythmic approaches, and you can start combining different parts, and it just sounds like a completely different thing. So if you're already doing things like hammer-ons and pull-offs with the left hand, we can start applying that to the right hand. Because tapping is basically like a hammer-on and a pull-off, except you're literally just tapping the fretboard. So when you're hammering on and pulling off, if you hammer on, you need enough force to make the note. If you're tapping, the same principle also applies, so you need to tap with enough force. If you're pulling off, generally you don't just remove your finger from the fretboard, you're actually pulling your finger across the string a little bit, so it pings, so you're essentially picking it a little bit. The same principle obviously applies for the right hand, so if you're doing that, you need to flick the string as opposed to just removing your hand straight off, otherwise it doesn't sound very good. So the first thing, aside from that, to talk about is which finger to use for tapping. So a lot of people use their first finger. I personally use my second finger because if I'm using a pick, I'm generally holding it in my hand, and then it frees up my middle finger so that I can tap, and then I don't need to necessarily move my pick. However, you can just tuck your pick away. Some people just chuck it over their shoulder. You can put it in the palm of your hand. Just find something that's comfortable for you, and then ultimately, if you're going to tap, just find whatever is comfortable regarding which finger you use. The second thing to talk about is going to be the direction in which you pull off the string. So some people will go upwards, some people will go downwards. If you're learning to tap, I'd recommend going downwards, because when you move your finger off the string, you're not going to be in contact with any other strings if you're on the top string, which is what we're going to start with. However, there isn't a right or wrong way with this. You can just do whatever you want. Sometimes you'll see people tapping and they've got their hand anchored in some way to the guitar body. This is a really good way of making sure that you're really accurate when you tap, because you're not flailing around and you're not approaching it from a great height. So what you can do, some people rest their palm against the strings, which is also really good for muting, especially if you're tapping, you've got no noise from behind. Or you can rest your thumb on the top, and then you've got a position where you're literally just putting your finger down as opposed to having to approach the guitar neck at a weird angle. Cool, so let's get straight into the first thing. So for these things I'm going to show you, there's going to be a tab below which you can look at. So you can follow along if you're at home or you've got a guitar on you. You can see exactly what I'm doing and hopefully match it up, and then that works for you. So the first shape we're going to use is based around the A minor pentatonic scale. We're going to do it all entirely on the high E string, and we're going to tap on the 12th fret. So with our left hand we're going to do 5th fret, we're going to do 8th fret, and then we're going to tap the 12th fret. So this is the first one. So the thing to watch out for this one, after you've tapped, is you want to replace your fingers back on the fretboard. So the trick with this is going to be that when you've pulled off and you're just on your first finger, when you go back to tap, if you place your little finger already ready, then you're just moving one shape around. So it's just this, as opposed to going, it just it's a lot easier for yourself, and you're just going to find it easier in the long run. Let's step it up a notch. We're going to turn it into a grouping of 4 and 4/4. So we're going to go 12th fret, pull off to the 8th fret, to the 5th fret, and then we're going to hammer on again to the 8th fret. So we've got a grouping of 4. This is example 2. So you can see with that one that we've hammered back on, so we've got a nice grouping of 4. This is a great way of resetting your fingers as well if you don't necessarily want to tap it in. Obviously it's good to be able to do both, So now let's have a look at turning that into an actual lick that you can practice and hopefully use, or at least have the concept of that you could turn into something else. This one's slightly Van Halen inspired. It's going to be using the same pattern as the one that we've just shown you in example 2, except I'm moving the left hand down by 1 fret every 2 times that it goes round, so you get a descending pattern. It sounds like this. So in that example, you can hear that the tap just stays on the same note, which means you don't need to think about it too much if you're just starting this stuff. All you need to think about is the left hand, and all you need to do is just slide it down. So that's great. So now we're going to have a look at turning that into a 2-string pattern. So we're going to do exactly the same pattern on the top string, and then when we reach the bottom, we're going to do the same pattern but on the B string. There is going to be something that's worth practicing and worth looking at, and that is when you're swapping strings, that's going to be when you're actually putting your fingers onto the B string. Because obviously you want to keep your left hand on the fretboard for as long as possible to maintain the note, but also you're going to have to swap position to 5th position from 2nd after you've done that entire sequence. So the secret that you can do with that is to place your fingers in the time in which it takes you to tap. So when you reach the end, you can then put your fingers in the right position and then hide their transition behind the sound of the tap. So let's have a look at that. So hopefully if you practice that, you can see how it feels to cross over strings, and then hopefully you can get an idea of how to avoid some of the unwanted string noise, and that's all going to be to do with the order in which you place your fingers on the fretboard. Let's have a go at turning this into some stuff that you could potentially use to come up with your own ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the notes of A minor pentatonic in the left hand, and we're going to tap the same notes of A minor pentatonic in the right hand in the 12th position. So if you've got your position, then it looks like this. You can then tap these notes over the top, which is nice and easy because they're all on the 12th fret except for the B string, which is on the 13th fret. So we're going to descend in the same pattern that we started with on example 1, but we're going to continue to go down the strings until we reach the bottom, and we're just going to tap those notes. So it sounds like this. So hopefully you can see that we're just outlining another minor pentatonic position above the one we're already using in the left hand. Something we can do to make these things sound less robotic and less exercisey is to include articulations with the right hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to start sliding with the right hand so we can hit additional notes, and we don't need to necessarily tap them. So it's going to sound like this. Cool. So hopefully you can see that I'm sliding up to the top of that position to hit those notes, and then you can start sliding in your own lines to come up with things that sound cool and they don't sound as robotic. So it doesn't sound like you're just going straight up and down the scale. You've actually got some sort of melodic content in there. That lick in particular works really well over an A minor chord. So if you're jamming out at home, you can try and include that in some of the things you're doing if you're improvising or just trying to come up with some solo ideas. And you can use that position to hopefully expand your reach of tapping knowledge. So hopefully this has been a good introduction to tapping if you've never tapped before, or maybe you want some new ideas in how to use tapping. We've got another video coming out where I'm going to be diving into some more advanced concepts where we're tapping with chords in the left hand and doing melodic ideas and rhythmic ideas. So make sure you check that out if you're interested. If you found any of the examples or content in this lesson useful, or you've just started tapping and you've learnt these things, or you've got something really cool to show us, feel free to tag GAK on any of their social media platforms. I've been Thom Pankhurst. See you next time.